Hello, everyone. I'm Bernie Zimmerman. I'm the chair of the Nevada County Historical Landmarks Commission, which was created by the Board of Supervisors in 1969 to promote and preserve Nevada County history. And one of the ways we do that is we conduct these interviews of people who are involved in Nevada County history. And this all happens at the Lyman Gilmore Junior Middle School. And everything that is being done in connection with this interview is being done by students. The students are supervised by the teacher, Scott Mills. And today, our producer is Dahlia. And Jordan and Dana are running the cameras. Ethan is responsible for the audio. And Elijah will be doing all the editing. At the end, the video will be publicly available. You can watch it either on our website, you can watch it on our YouTube channel, you can watch it through the Nevada County Historical Society website. It's going to be a public document. Now, today I'm going to be interviewing Hank Meals, who is a well-known hiker, author, archaeologist. Welcome, Hank.
Thank you.
In fact, I read a Union article about you recently, which they called you a historian, folk artist, and experimental geographer. So hopefully by the time we get to the end of this, you explain what an experimental geographer is. But let's start with just some basics. Tell us something about yourself, where you were born, when you were born, where you grew up, that sort of thing.
I was born in Baltimore on the East Coast, okay. On the Chesapeake Bay.
Not the Baltimore up in the High Sierra.
No, not the local Baltimore. And in 1939. So I'm historic myself.
All right. And tell us something about your schooling.
I went to California in 1961, and I went to a series of colleges, graduated from San Francisco State in 1965. Very stimulating time to be there. Lots of history being made at that time.
Sure. Who was the guy with the tam?
Hayakawa.
Hayakawa. Yeah. I remember those days.
Well, it was exhilarating to be there. By 1969, there was a tendency for people my age and younger to want to go back to the land.
Yes.
So we were sort of reinventing history. We moved to. A lot of us moved to the Sierra foothills. I came up here in 1969. Bought land up here in 73. We lived with kerosene light and wood burning stoves, etc., for a number of years. And then I moved into Nevada City. I lived on the San Juan Ridge most of the time.
Yeah.
Made some very good friends there, very, very unique and stimulating crowd.
So you were in San Francisco during the Summer of Love.
I sure was.
You want to say anything about that?
It was a very unique time. I don't know what to say. All I could say is living in San Francisco was itself an education. I was also turned on to photography, and I had a teacher who was part of what was known as the Work Progress Administration.
Oh, yeah.
It produced some very famous photographers and public works and many things. And so I worked for a number of years for different newspapers in San Francisco as a photojournalist. That's still my fundamental love is photography. But now it's mixed with cultural and historical additions, and well, here I am.
So you came up, you said you were living on the ridge, and you were basically off-grid.
Right.
And that's interesting because when we came up here in '79, we were off grid for quite a few years. I remember all the joys of propane refrigerators and things like that.
There were a lot more chores involved.
Yeah. All right. So when you came up here, was that when you became a photojournalist?
No, before that in San Francisco.
In San Francisco.
I started there,
That's
and I've
right.
continued it all along. I've always, in the beginning, I worked with writers, and we sold things to magazines, newspapers, etc. In time, I became a writer myself, and now the combination of photography and writing is what I really enjoy, with deep history involved in that.
Does the name Ned Hilton mean anything to you?
No.
Okay, it will soon.
Okay.
Well, when you said WPA, that reminded me. He was he worked for the Federal Public Arts Project during the Depression days, and he came here and did a series of sketches about Nevada County. And I've got an article about him with. We found the sketches finally. So I thought maybe. Might have been something you knew about, because we're trying to get more information about it. So anyway, kind of rolling forward. So when you came up here, did you continue working as a photojournalist?
Yeah, it was a lot more difficult. I had a series of dark rooms that were like converted outhouses. They were out. It was difficult. It was very difficult to do. Gary Snyder said to me one time that you're going to have to move back to the city if you're making a career in this. But in the meantime, I got a job with the Forest Service in 1975 as an archaeologist because my degree was in anthropology. And we were creating NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, had just been created and implemented in 1969. The Forest Service was trying to figure out how to implement the part that had to do with history and archaeology, because for the first time, not the first time, but under environmental laws, the history of an area was considered a resource itself, along with biology, timber, and all the other. It was considered a resource. So we didn't quite know how to implement it, and we started with, I say we, I was the low man on the totem pole. There was a top-notch archaeologist who started the program named Susan Lindstrom. You may know her.
I know the name.
So we had to figure out a way to survey the forest, or survey the project that was being worked on that would create an impact, like a timber sale. How would you go about locating the sites and evaluating them? So it was a lot of fumbling, but we got quite good at it. I think it's an excellent program now.
Now, did you know much about Nevada County history before you moved up here?
I didn't at the time, no.
You sure knew a lot now.
Well, I just loved it. One of the things that's absolutely fascinating about this area, I also love hiking, and the fact that the history I was learning was all in the field, outdoors, not hanging out in libraries. It was fantastic, because you could look at an obvious thing would be like a hydraulic mine. Each one of these is a story. Everything you see, a ditch segment, a former railroad logging, roads, cabins, not to mention the indigenous people's sites, petroglyphs, bedrock mortars, campsites, etc. So, I mean, everything, you did pre-field research, so that you had an idea of what was that going to be out there.
So you hit a book at some point.
Oh, definitely. It was a wonderful combination of research and, I mean, you couldn't do one without the other because you had to produce a report and you needed references. Just your opinion is hardly adequate. So it was an incredibly stimulating job, and I hardly get out of the neighborhood because this area is so rich with stories that just about anywhere I go, it's bountiful.
Do you have any favorite stories you want to share right now?
Okay, one of the exciting aspects of the job was getting to interview old-timers. One would be Leland Pauley at the Camptonville Post Office, whose family had lived in the region for generations. Another was Gus Poggi, a favorite. Gus was, as a young man, he delivered food and supplies to miners in remote locations. Obviously, I was interested in geography too, so of that, I became aware of the way to interview these old-timers who had spent most of their life outside. As you age, it's more difficult to read a map, obviously, because you're losing eyesight. A lot of these guys were macho. They weren't going to talk about that aging. But what you do is, well, you know where that cabin is on the north side of Buckingham Ridge, about 3 miles from the Mexican mine. So all of the interviewing and placement, since we had to tie it to a place, was geographic. And I still use that as much as possible today in talking with just about anybody. And you'll notice that there are people who are keyed to highways, and you turn left at Wendy's or whatever, and there are other people who say, well, over there on the northeast slope of Brunswick Basin, you know, they'll be much more specific and place it in a landscape. And that's a kind of richness that I really like to see perpetuated, and the way that places should be addressed.
Is that kind of come within the rubric of experimental geography?
Well, yeah, in part.
That's
yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Now, what happened to all these interviews? Were they recorded in some fashion?
I have a few. I did something for the part of a grant for the California Council for Humanities, mostly about on the San Juan Ridge, and I did about 40 interviews for that. That was grant-based. I did 4 or 5 for the Forest Service, and I've done a number of others. I've gotten pretty proficient at it.
Do you have them?
Some of them, yeah.
Are they in a position where they can be shared?
Well, the Forest Service has, yeah.
All right, I'll talk to you about that later.
Okay.
But let's talk about hiking.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that must be one of your favorite avocations.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you get into hiking? Probably not at San Francisco during the Summer of Love, I'm guessing.
No. As a child, like I said in the beginning, I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay. The Chesapeake Bay is an estuary with lots of different creeks and swamplands all around it, with different ecosystems. So we pretty much ate out of the bay. There were crabs, oysters, fish, eel, and so I got used to that early on. And even as say your age, I would be out hiking 6 o'clock in the morning, take a frying pan and a little jar of butter and my fishing pole, because for sure for lunch I'd be having fish probably.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, flipping over rocks, salamanders, finding old fascinating historical evidence. I mean, it's just something I did later on, and I was surprised to see that reignited decades later.
You've hiked probably all over Nevada County.
Nevada, Sierra,
And others.
Yuba.
Do you have a favorite hike?
That just really depends. It's an interesting thing. I have all kinds of friends who are like peak baggers. They're always looking for a new experience. For me, I can go back to certain trails like the Doolittle Trail up above Washington, or South Yuba Trail, which is a new trail. Relatively new from the 90s, and it's pieced together from segments of old historic trails. But when I go back to them, it's a different season, different time of year. The lighting is different. There have been changes. A favorite tree may have died, a landslide. It's just a new experience every time.
Do you do overnight hikes? What's like the longest hike?
It's interesting because when the railroad was put in 1860,
Which railroad? The Transcontinental?
Central Pacific Railroad, in 1869, part of the way they enticed them to build the railroad was the government offered them every other section. A section is 640 acres. So what that does is creates a checkerboard pattern of ownership. If you look at a map, you can see this checkerboard. And what that also does is create a management nightmare, because a lot of those are Forest Service land. So what I'm saying is you can only make a trail so long before you run into something owned by Southern Pacific Industries, a company interested in logging.
Yep.
And they have different ideas about how to use the landscape. So the trails are necessarily short because you'll eventually, there are lots of historic trails. Our first books were all historic trails.
Well, let's talk about your books, because you've written several of them. How did you get into writing and all that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. My wife at the time, she's since deceased, but was as enthusiastic as I was about hiking and history. And since I was working for the Forest Service, it was just a natural to blend the two. And I knew of these historic trails that weren't necessarily part of a project I was working on for them. But I wanted to tell people, I mean, how can you not be curious about a trail named Bedbug Smith's Trail?
I guess. So I know one of your books is called something like Yuba Trails.
Yuba Trails 2, and those are the entire Yuba watershed. And then there's one called The River, which is just the South Fork of the Yuba, because it's the one that gets the most use.
Now, I noticed, I was curious, I went online, and on Amazon you can buy a copy of the Yuba Trails paperback for $261. Now, is it worth $261?
No way.
So what can you tell me about that book, if you know? Why is there somebody selling a $261 book?
I have no idea. You see that routinely. You know, there'll be a range of any kind of book. I see them online too, and most of them are selling for about what they sold to begin with.
They're still in print?
Bucks. No, it's out of print. And the reason for that is at a certain point I realized I wrote it for locals. We wrote these books for locals, and they started to get passed around, and more people came up here. And I'm not the only cause, but I'm one of the causes for more people using this area. And I think at this point we have reached capacity when it comes to tourists.
Saturation.
We don't need any. We're at capacity. It's hard on the environment. It's potentially catastrophic when you think about fire and E. coli bacteria and many other things. So I've just backed out of that.
Now, and for many years you wrote a blog which contained all sorts of interesting articles about history and oftentimes involving a hike or how to get to the site or something like that. And I think that can still be accessed. I know you've stopped updating it, but that can still be accessed.
Right.
Why don't you tell the viewers, if they're interested, where would they go? What's the URL?
Yeah, I can. I haven't used it for so long. It's
That's it. Yeah.
yubatreadhead.blogspot.com.
Yeah, yubatreadhead.blogspot. That sounds right. So for all the viewers who are interested in learning more about Hank's work, but can't spend $261 for the paperback, go to the blog. Now, Hank, what's always impressed me about your work is your ability to combine history, archaeology, and hiking in a single experience. And I assume that's intentional on your part?
Well, sure.
And what's the idea behind that?
Well, this is the fundamental way that people we're talking about got around. Trails were essential, and even in the area before written history for the indigenous people, places, say Highway 20, Washington Ridge, that clearly was a trail used by the Indians because it's a ridge top, and it takes you a long distance, takes you to the high country, or up country anyway.
So, Hank, one of the things that's always impressed me about your work is the way you combine history and archaeology and hiking into a single experience. And I assume you were motivated to do that? That's intentional?
Well, on the one hand, they aren't separate things. I mean, those are separate disciplines. It's just our archaeology, history, hiking. It's just our take on it. They are intertwined, in fact.
But there aren't many people who teach history and archaeology while they're hiking, as you do.
Well, the landscape is so rich with stories around here that once you've acquired the knowledge, I can't keep my mouth shut. And so there you go. It's just a natural.
There's a kind of a debate, last question, in society about whether you should evaluate history, and especially in an area like this, with the values in place at the time the history was made, or with the current values. Do you have a view about that?
Well, you're talking about, say, political correctness?
Well, let's be more specific. Let's talk about mining. Okay? So if you went back to the last half of the 19th century, mining in Nevada County was considered to be progressive, latest technology, unlocking the wealth of the nation, fueling progress, all of that. Now you fast forward 100, 150 years ago, and there are a lot of people who think mining, it ruined the environment, it did away with a lot of the Nisenan, we've got all kinds of contaminants in the soil, and that sort of thing. So that's the kind of the debate, I'm talking about. Can you condemn mining, now because, or condemn the people who were mining then because of the way we feel about mining now?
I don't think you can. It's not about judgment. That is, in fact, how California was populated as a result of mining. The standard model is moving the frontier westward and homesteading, and then bringing in the troops to protect the people who've taken the land from the Indians. You don't have to make a value judgment on it. It is what it is. I mean, I quite agree. It was the economy of the time, and at the same time that I can appreciate the innovation and the creativity of the mining people, there was very little realization. There were still fewer people that the impact it was having on the environment. For example, hydraulic mining. It's not only a historic event, and I can respect the engineering and the vision that went into such monumental tasks, but it's also had an environmental effect. And that people were becoming conscious of that around the turn of the 20th century. The Sierra Club is in there at 1896. And the reason for the creation of the Forest Service is because of watershed management, logging and grazing with no constraints was wrecking the place. So, I mean, you acknowledge it for what it was in its time. Now we know better, let's put it that way. Same is true with fire management. I mean, we took the position, and the Forest Service and others early on, to stamp out fire, to always stop it. The indigenous people used fire. They managed with long-range vision. They burned the understory, the brush. There's such a thing as a fuels ladder. Small, say, dried grasses, intermediate trees, get into the limbs of the larger trees, etc. And that's what creates a forest fire. But if you take out that lower level, if you burn and you do it regularly, it's called fuels management now, you're going to have long-range results that are positive. In fact, a lot of indigenous people now are starting up their own fuels management sort of programs to teach people how to do this, and people managing fires acknowledge that was a bad policy to allow that to build up, but they couldn't have known it then. We know it now. So that's an example really of taking something from history and incorporating it into the present.
Of course, Judge Sawyer knew a lot of this when he issued his injunction in 1884 to stop dumping the debris into the rivers and tributaries. All right, I think we'll bring this to a close. Thank you very much, Hank, for doing this.
All right.
We've just scratched the surface.